That mic over the weekend was horrific, but it should be working now. And the first thing I want to talk about, this card, for a fight night card, was extremely good again. And we've had quite a few good fight night cards recently, even if you want to talk about that Brazil card, apart from the main event. But the two slams on the card, for example, Drakkar Klose gets a slam. Out of nowhere. You could not predict this. You couldn't even put a bet on this type of stuff. That's how ridiculous it was. Cody Brundage, of all people, power bombing Zach Reese and knocking him out unconscious. And what surprised me about that knockout was Zach Reese was meant to be this guy who a lot of people are talking about, who looks good on the regional scene, but he was fighting a bunch of cans. But my argument about that is when you're young and you're on the way up, you're not going to be fighting top stars in the sport. So I get it, but Cody Brundage needed to win that fight for his career. If he did not win that, he would have been out of the UFC in no time. You would have seen on the Twitter page, can't remember what they're called, with that X sign, Cody Brundage out of the UFC, and I think that's just saved him, and he got a performance bonus, so he's just in the UFC. And he got lucky with that Jacob Malkoun fight as well. Again, another thing where if he lost that fight, it was probably out of the UFC, but he kind of cheated his way by saying how he was injured and then got the win, even though, yeah, it was a disqualification, but he did milk it a little bit, like Aljamain against Petr did. The Rodolfo Bellato against Ihor Potieria. He went into that fight as a heavy favourite, and he was seconds away from that going, and Ihor Potieria having a chance, because he started off quite well, you know. And then he gets countered, puts Bellato down, and you're thinking the referee's going to jump in. And let me just check if it was Kerry Hartley. Never mind, it wasn't, considering the fact that that could have been stopped in that fight early. And then Jared Gooden as well, of all people, makes a massive comeback with his hands down, and then Wellington Turman just bottles that fight. Like, these fights were pure entertainment. And I need to apologise, well, I don't need to really, but Sean Strickland does to Dustin Stoltzfus, because him against Punahele Soriano has made me believe that he's no longer the worst middleweight in the UFC. I used to think this guy, he hasn't got much about him. Sean Strickland's mugging him off, saying he's always doing these like type of yoga stretches and doing all this stuff, and there's nothing about him, he can't really fight. But watching him against Punahele Soriano, he looked very good. And Punahele Soriano was meant to go out there and KO him, but Dustin Stoltzfus, being like calculated in the fight, was able to use the kicks to try and neutralise the power in the hands and kick into the body whilst mixing up some takedowns. And you could see that Punahele Soriano was starting to gas out, and all he has, and I'll repeat it again, is an overhand left. That is his best punch, the only thing you'll see him use, one-dimensional, will always lead off the back leg, and he won't even feint into the pocket. So I can't call Stoltzfus the worst fighter, and I don't want to call Punahele Soriano it either, and he probably isn't, but I just don't think he's that good. But then you look at the fight with Gerald Meerschaert, he was extremely close to beating him until he decided, right, let me try and shoot on his leg and try and get like a finish, and then ends up getting reversed and then ends up getting submitted. Like, he has had fights like where he's been able to survive. He ain't a guy who's always getting knocked out in the UFC. It doesn't happen. But honestly, I do need to give him more respect, because like, he beat Joe Pyfer. It was an injury, but imagine on your record saying that you beat Joe Pyfer and you're Dustin Stoltzfus. It just don't look right on paper. So I think Soriano's got one more fight. If he bottles that fight or makes like a fool of himself in that fight, he is out of the UFC. I think he could be out of it very soon, especially now that he's 1-5. And looking at Dustin Stoltzfus, that's the type of record you would have thought he would have had, but he actually doesn't. So we're going to move on to the next fight. Joaquim Silva against Clay Guida. Clay Guida was so close to winning that fight. I'm joking. He weren't so close, but he could have won that fight, and I wanted him to win that fight, especially in the third round. I did not pick him, by the way, before you say that. The reason I think he could have won that in the third round is if he carried on striking, because Joaquim Silva was gassing a little bit, but Clay Guida, non-stop cardio, but it's just holding on to the back of the legs of Joaquim Silva, which is allowing him to get that guillotine choke, and he's just scoring points in the round by just holding submission attempts, not really doing any damage, but just getting them submission attempts. Like Clay Guida, If he could just stay there in the pocket and do what he did in the second round, where he mixes up like a double jab, uses a lot of feints and blitzes him for a takedown, and then carry on striking, he could have won the fight. But obviously he didn't do that. And considering the fact that Joaquim Silva almost knocked out Arman Tsarukyan, and then you have Clay Guida doing that, it just shows you how MMA math will never work. And we always knew that. I'm speaking like common sense. We all know this is true. But it's just weird how I think some of the matchups play out. Like, how is a guy like Clay Guida fighting the guy who just fought against Arman Tsarukyan? So in my opinion, I want to see Clay Guida fight Jim Miller, UFC 300. Jim Miller will probably win that fight, but it's just an entertaining fight. And I don't know, Clay Guida might want to retire. Through his brain, he probably should, but he looks like he's still got it. But he won't be able to ever compete in like the rankings. It just won't happen. He'll just have to fight the lower down ranked guys and maybe be like your Derek Chisora of the MMA. Sean Brady versus Kelvin Gastelum. If you actually look at the votes, I need to have a quick look because I think more people were picking, Gastelum. A lot of people were picking him to beat him because he was in the best shape of his career for welterweight. And Sean Brady got TKO'd by Bilal Muhammad. Bilal, remember the decision, whatever you want to call him, boring, gets mocked by people all the time, and then goes out there, and then, you might laugh at what I'm going to say here. Sean Brady was doing some technical things with the striking. His footwork had improved massively. But obviously we know what would have happened if he stayed on the feet striking with him. But it was the way that he was able to use counters to get down Kelvin Gastelum. He couldn't do that against Bilal. Bilal was running at him forward with a 1-2, but all he would do is shoot for a takedown when he was out of range. He weren't even looking to shoot on Bilal when he was coming forward with that 1-2. But against Kelvin Gastelum, we saw it on the counter. And this guy, Sean Brady, he is very good. The only problem is his chin. And that is why we need to see him fight Jack Della Maddalena, because we know Jack Della Maddalena can get into a gritty fight now. We've seen it happen with, what was his name, Bafel Hafiz. We've seen him be taken down quite a lot, but he's known for getting back up. But I think against a guy like Sean Brady, getting back up to the feet is going to be extremely hard because Sean Brady looks quite big. I don't like to repeat this, but remember that Craig Jones grappling match. That is very impressive to do it against a guy like that. And Jack Della Maddalena, if Bafel Hafiz on short notice is doing that, imagine what Sean Brady would do when he gets him down to the ground. I think I made a video on this. I don't think he's going to be able to just bounce back up to the feet and scramble his way out. It will not happen. But that being said, he could end up like Pete Rodriguez, Sean Brady, where he just gets popped off by the jab. He's nervous. He's like, oh, I don't know what to do. Starts backing up and then gets put down. They are the two scenarios. I think that fight has a finish in it because Sean Brady is a finisher on the ground. He can be. Like, if you want to look at the last 4 fights where he's won 3 of them by a submission. Like, he looks very good. So yeah, I can get where you're coming from if you think he might be a bit boring on the ground, because you see there's some high level things like trying to get the Dagestani handcuff. I believe he was trying. He had like both of his legs trapped in a triangle so that Gastelum couldn't even move. He had to absorb these punches to the head whilst trying to like use the cage to get back up. But because Brady's trapped the legs, it's extremely hard to like bridge or do anything with your legs, because the legs were eliminated at that point and Brady was just manhandling him, ragdolling him, whatever word you want to say. So yeah, you need to book that fight with Jack Della Maddalena. Now Figueiredo versus Rob Font. That fight, now looking at it on paper, has put him in a perfect position in bantamweight, because look, we're already talking about looking at him fighting Petr Yan. Do you want to take this fight and potentially be on a 4-fight losing streak? Although I think Yan could win this, and I do think Yan would win that fight. It's an extremely hard 50-50 fight. And I know Rob Font is no Petr Yan, but I was looking at a few things in that fight from Figueiredo which might be a problem for Yan. We know Yan likes to pressure forward non-stop, be in your face with that high block. Henry Cejudo has also mentioned this. If you are tapping your hands on your face, the kind of block at times where you can't look at your opponent and you're putting both of your palms on your eyes, that whole body is going to be exposed because you've had to lift your elbows up away from your body, and then that whole like midsection of your body is now exposed. Figueiredo was taking down Rob Font when he was pressuring. But if you look at the pressure Rob Font was applying, it's not the same like Petr Yan, because Rob Font will take more back steps, but Petr Yan will just keep coming forward. And Figueiredo doesn't use just power to get the takedowns. He's using technique. He's using like the double leg and using his shoulder to drive forwards instead of like always interlocking his hands and then picking him up and then throwing him. You don't have to do that. And it just shows you how technically skilled a lot of these flyweights probably are. Like, we'll never see a guy like Brandon Moreno move up because he isn't as big as a guy like Figueiredo. But that is why you'll hear a lot of people say flyweights are one of the most, if not the most, technical fighters, because they weigh the least. You get to see more of their attributes compared to like the heavyweights who are hard hitters and can just put you out of one punch and the fight will be over. But that being said, heavyweight is evolving, so I wouldn't really say they're not talented, but I'm talking about the vast majority, because we are seeing people like Tom Aspinall, and I know this is the most random thing to bring up when I'm not even talking about them, but I'm just giving an example. So yeah, Petr Yan against Figueiredo has to be the fight. I wanted maybe, I know it won't happen now, but Song Yadong versus Figueiredo would have been a bit interesting, because we know how good Song Yadong is leading off that lead hand and then stopping takedowns, like extremely high level takedown defense. And Song Yadong won't just keep walking forward. Again, he will take more backward steps. And even if he does pressure, we've seen times where he pressures and still is able to get good takedown defense. So Rob Font is a normal bantamweight, yet he wasn't able to neutralize the jab. And another thing I wanted to mention, in that fight with Figueiredo, when you're a shorter guy and closing the distance, it's going to be much harder. But Figueiredo made it look easy. He wobbled him a few times. Apart from the first round, which you could give to Font, I gave it to Figueiredo because he had like the harder shots and the bigger moments in that round. Like when he caught him with that right hand. Leading off that right hand is very effective, and he did do it in this fight to get into the pocket, but more feints would have been better. But with Rob Font fighting behind that jab, it can be a benefit to a shorter guy if you're looking to do takedowns, and it was, because when you're throwing that jab and you're a shorter guy, your opponent who's taller has got to aim his hand more downwards to reach you, compared to if you're the same height or a bit taller, they're going straight and up. So by going straight and a little bit down, Figueiredo's already lower to his like midsection where he could shoot for a takedown. And that is why when he came forward a few times in that fight, remember he's like 5'5". It's going to be easier to get the takedowns because he is a technical takedown guy. He's not one who relies purely on power. If he did, maybe it could have been a different topic of discussion. But in my opinion, that performance by Figueiredo was like a statement one. Very impressive. Hurt Rob Font a few times. He's very durable, by the way, so it's going to be hard to finish him. But I can't believe I didn't pick him after watching that. But he will be good in this division, as long as he can last, because he's getting a bit old now. But yeah. And quickly about Mike Perry. I'm at the point with Mike Perry where he looks like no one can beat him. You might say that Michael Venom Page could have beat him, and no one will believe me, but I actually did pick Mike Perry to beat MVP. And I know you don't care, but I'm just saying. But again, look at the people he's fighting. Yeah, they might be a bit retired, semi-retired, I'll say. Like Luke Rockhold and who else? Eddie Alvarez. They wanted to make their fight. Who else has he fought? Julian Lane. He looks like he will be a problem. And one fight I'd want to see in the future, I doubt it will happen. It depends how long Mike Perry stays there, because think about the amount of damage your face takes, the scar tissue. Eventually, you're going to not want to do it because it's going to be painful. Like, it's not like MMA where, yeah, it will hurt if you get hit with like a hook or something, but you will have to quit because of how painful it is. And you don't really see that apart from that Luke Ropshoff guy. But in BKFC, we are seeing fighters quit. Luke Rockhold, he's not really a quitter, he's just got a glass jaw and gets knocked out. Eddie Alvarez, I don't really think he's a quitter, because if you look at the fight with Justin Gaethje, who got finished first? Okay, no, that's a bit of an exaggeration, that wouldn't really make sense, but you look at the Conor McGregor fights with Eddie Alvarez, he didn't quit, he just got battered, he got slapped up all over the place. That's all that happened, he doesn't really quit, and Mike Perry is making these guys quit, who if he fought in the UFC back in the day, it would not end well for him. I really don't think it would. Like, if he fought Eddie Alvarez in the UFC back in the day, he would get finished, in my opinion. But because it's bare knuckle and you're fighting with your bare hand pretty much, and it's all about grit and determination and how much pain can you take. It's a bit like if you played dead arm before. If you play dead arm with someone, you get hit in the arm and then you want to quit because of the pain, but whoever's got the higher pain tolerance is going to win. And that's a bit like BKFC. I know it's completely different in terms of where you're getting hit, but I'm trying to make that analogy of like, it's more of a pain thing and how much can you withstand, because you're not really going to get knocked out. Yeah, it can happen, but you don't really see as many knockouts. It's more about you getting beaten up and you're getting hurt and you're getting cut. It's the pain, like I'm mentioning with dead arm. It's the pain that is making you want to quit. And Mike Perry is just perfect for it. So next fight, I would want to see a guy like Darren Till fight him, but I think he might be looking at Karate Combat. But I believe they've fought back in the day. If you watch that video by Mike Malott on his YouTube, he said about they fought. I think it was like a mini joking thing, but Darren Till was getting the better of Mike Perry. And Mike Perry against Darren Till, that could do some good numbers. Plus, Darren Till, you might laugh at this, but that is actually an okay matchup for him. Okay, I'll say. I'm not going to say he's going to win that fight because I need more time to think about that. But that would be an entertaining fight because all you need from Darren Till is a 1-2. That's all he does. And with Mike Perry throwing very wide and Darren Till being a guy who likes to throw straight down the middle, I can see why that's a good matchup for him. I really could. Because when you're swinging wide and you get caught, you're going to be pushed back, and Mike Perry can get caught early. But one thing that he's got over Darren Till is when he's getting hurt, he won't quit. Darren Till is more likely to quit in this type of fight than Mike Perry. Mike Perry is relentless. The pressure he will put on you when he's being whacked to the face going backwards is unbelievable. I can't think of a guy who would do that in BKFC. With all the pain, getting a broken nose, you might even lose a bit of teeth like Rockhold, yet he still comes forward and pressures like that. He's just something else. And it's good that he's making more money in this than he made in the UFC. But one thing I'll say is, there's no point making the comparison, oh, just go to BKFC to make more money, because without the UFC name, he wouldn't be able to get to the bare knuckle thing and make this type of money and get the fights that he got. Probably not. He'd have to build his way up, and even then, like if you look at the top guys in BKFC, a lot of you might not even know them and they're probably not making that much. But the UFC will always be a good stepping stone in your career. It always will be, because it's the biggest thing. Then maybe move off to PFL like a Derek Brunson or like a One Championship if you want to make more money. And even that being said, One Championship has got some very good competition. It's just unpopular, maybe unheard of, not really a mainstream thing yet like the UFC. UFC isn't fully mainstream, but it's more mainstream than like One. You never hear that being promoted on the TV. Maybe on YouTube, but that's it. Sometimes that might happen. So yeah, I like that win by Mike Perry. His fights are always entertaining in BKFC. They just don't last very long. So yeah, thank you for watching. Talk to you soon.